very much indeed. Well, it gives me great pleasure to be back here on stage and to be able to welcome to B4E, Ambassador. Now, let me see if I can at least give some approximation of your name anyway. Nozipho Mxakato-Diseko?
Nozipho Mxakato-Diseko.
Okay.
You tried.
I tried.
Yes.
It was a noble try.
Yes, it was.
It was a failure.
No.
But never mind. But what I think, in terms of names, I think we're going to have to get a little bit of abbreviation going. We're calling it COP17, CMP7, and but I think I must once mention its full title, which is the 17th session of the Conference of the Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, and the 7th session of the Conference of the Parties serving as the meeting of the parties, CMP7, to the Kyoto Protocol. But I think we can call it COP17, or let's just call it Durban.
I
think it's what everyone has been.
Yes, yes, it's easier.
Ambassador, what are your emotions, if you like, as you approach this event? It's going to be on your home soil. It's clearly an important one. We'll get into the details of what has to happen, what has happened, what needs to happen, and so on. But what are your feelings? Are you nervous?
We're very nervous because with this COP, which is not the first to be held in Africa, Africa sees it as a very important one for themselves. It's important to them in several respects. One, to mobilize funds for the various discussions to pursue projects in the various areas that were discussed in the working groups on which a report back was given. Two, they see it as important to showcase what they themselves have been doing on climate change. And three, they see it as important in terms of the outcome or the package of what we get out of Durban. So we are under pressure, not only from African countries, but from developing countries in general. It's been very demanding in terms of the legwork to get parties to narrow the ground, to narrow the differences and ensure that we carry the European Union on the one side, as well as ensure that we bring on board other parties. It's been a very busy year.
It's been very busy, but how would you characterize the progress that's been made in all of this preparatory work? I mean, it sounds as if you feel it hasn't quite come as far as you would have preferred.
I think in some ways, in a big way, we have actually done a lot of work in relation to one part of the package. That is with regards to the implementation of the Cancun decisions. A lot of work has been done there, setting up, in designing the institutions that were mandated by the Cancun decisions. On finance, my former Minister of Finance, who's now Minister of Planning, Minister Manuel, is one of the co-chairs that is establishing, that is working to design the Green Climate Fund. The adaptation committee is also, work on that is underway. I mean, a lot of progress has been made. On technology also, where various things were supposed to be established, a great deal of progress has been made. It's in the critical issue of the overarching, I think, legal framework that will carry the decisions with respect to the Kyoto Protocol and the second commitment period.
That's the crunch, isn't it?
That is the crunch.
It's not just a matter of building on Cancun, which was, if you like, only a slightly incremental series of achievements. You've really got to make a step change and boot things forward with a replacement to the Kyoto Protocol, and that against a background of some dissension and difficulty. The stakes are high, aren't they?
The stakes are high. We are back to where we were in Copenhagen. What Cancun did was to buy us space and time to revive the process. And so part of the pressure for us in South Africa was that the system should not be collapsed. The UNFCCC system should not be collapsed in Durban. So although the difficulty, the challenge is big, the number of countries that we have to work with is small. Remember, the parties to the Kyoto Protocol are 194, and we only have about 3 to 4 countries that want to jump out of it. We have not given up yet. We're still working very hard. I heard last week my minister and I had all the negotiators, not all the negotiators, a group of the negotiators in South Africa from 45 countries to focus on consolidating, just pinning down the progress we've accomplished on the Cancun decisions, but also to look at novel ways in which we can deal with the political problems relating to the Kyoto Protocol and on the one side, and the issue of the legally binding instrument on the other side for those countries that want to jump out. At issue for the countries that want to jump out is how do you capture emerging countries that are great polluters, such as the basic, Brazil, India, South Africa, and China, as well as others that are OECD countries. That's the main issue. That was the main issue also in Copenhagen, that the level of emissions covered under the Kyoto Protocol is nowhere near, this is the argument, what should be covered. And developing countries, these developing countries are saying, we need to remember that central to whatever is done in the UNFCCC process is the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities. This is a concept that covers the history of climate change, that they were not there when the Industrial Revolution began. So they cannot carry the same extent of commitments as countries that started polluting during the times of earlier in the 1860s or somewhere thereabouts. However, they're willing to do their bit in actions. And so we're trying to narrow the ground and in our engagements with them to say, you know, there must be novel ways that indicate a higher level of commitment by the newcomers, the new polluters, or sorry, emitters.
I'm not sure about you, Ambassador, but my impression is that when history looks back on this whole process and looks at the success or the failure, it's not going to focus so much on what the developing countries did, on the issues that, although they're important, I'm not taking away from them. What they're going to look at is what the United States does and says at Durban. And it seems to me that the elephant in the room has been reluctance on the part of the United States. And we have to be real and look at the fact that next year, 2012, will be an election year in the United States. On the eve of an election year, it will be a rash president to sign up to far-reaching action on climate change, knowing that his likely Republican opponent may even suspect or sort of call into question the whole idea of climate change, of human causation of climate change.
Developing countries understand the politics and the national realities that they have to work with. Not only do you have complications in the United States, China is faced with an elective Congress next year of the Communist Party. And they understand this. And working with me, they've shown a creativity in trying to find solutions that ensure that we increase the commitments that these countries carry in a manner that will not create difficulties that will impact negatively on the process itself. For example, the United Nations is carried under the convention itself. That's where it's been captured all this time. So what they're looking for is for the US to increase what it's doing within the area where it is covered, but not to invite others into the UNFCCC, as it were. And this is a point in particular for Europe, where they're looking for comparability with the US. They want to be able to measure what the US is doing in a way that is understandable and comparable to what they're doing. So countries have had a way of dealing with the United States. From the time that the United States rejected the Kyoto Protocol, they were able to cover it under the UNFCCC. I think this is a problem generally that the UN system has to deal with regards to the US. You're never sure whether it's going to ratify instruments.
Well, where does that leave us? I mean, can one sit here and be optimistic, hopeful in any kind of realistic way that what will emerge from Durban will be something which is meaningful, worthy, that will rise to the challenge, which has all of the developing nations, including your own, on board, and crucially, has the United States on board?
I think we can be hopeful. We can be hopeful. The US is not saying that it'll come out of where it's covered. It's staying where it's covered. And they're applying their minds. I've asked them to negotiate with the European Union to see what they can do on comparability. I've asked the G77 to negotiate with the United States to see what it can do with its pledges within on the side where they are. So I'm sure we'll come up with a package that takes the process further, taking into account that we are one COP away from the Copenhagen COP. So rebuilding the system is not going to be easy. It was never going to be easy because it was on the verge of collapse. It came out completely battered in Copenhagen, and the Mexicans raised it. What we have to do is to make sure that it stands firmly, and then we can build on that.
Go on, sorry.
Built into the agreements is a monitoring and evaluation schema that works according to time. A review is mandated in 2015. A lot can be done, but if we don't consolidate the structure in Durban, you might not have a structure to be able to work with the review that's forthcoming to ensure that it is adjusted to be in line with developments globally, economically.
You've said, well, you just said, I'm sure that there will be progress.
Yes.
Is there a plan B? What's the price of failure? I mean, if there isn't really progress, if there isn't meaningful progress, if all we can do is keep on talking.
Failure is not an option in Durban. Failure is not an option because, as I said to you, we are one COP away from the Copenhagen COP. We're fully conscious of the fact that a result that wasn't, or no result at all, would actually collapse the system. We can't afford to have that with climate change. We really cannot afford to.
Do you think all the parties agree that they have that view as well?
Last week, when we had the ministers in Pretoria, there seemed to be a sense of urgency for me. And we now need to push. We're going to have another ministerial meeting in South Africa, a pre-COP ministerial, where we get the ministers to buckle down and ensure that they really apply their minds to those areas that are necessary to deal with in order to be able to get a package that will take the process forward in Durban.
Let's leave it there, Ambassador. Thank you very much indeed for a most lucid and frank expose of what's going on. You've been very much involved behind the scenes, and let's hope that we can all share your optimism, and we'll have this conversation again perhaps at the next B4E. If not, then around about the end of the year, we'll know one way or the other.
Come to Durban.
I'm not sure I'm going to come this time, but anyway, very good to have you with us. Thank you very much indeed, Ambassador.
Thanks.